Last time we spoke about the fall of Wiiwak. In June of 1945, Allied forces led by General George Stevens intensified their campaign to capture the strategic town of Wiiwak in New Guinea. After years of grueling combat, they relentlessly pressed against entrenched Japanese defenses, including the remnants of General Mano's 41st Division. The Australians achieved critical victories by securing vital supply routes and establishing new airfields, facilitating their advance. By May the 8th, after some intense fighting, Australian troops effectively seized Wiiwak Point, eliminating entrenched Japanese soldiers in their bunkers and caves. Despite suffering heavy casualties, the Australians distinguished themselves through bravery and tactical ingenuity. Ultimately, the successful capture of Wiiwak marked a pivotal moment in the Pacific Campaign, showcasing the determination and the spirit of the Allies as they pushed towards victory in the Pacific Theater. This episode is Operation Downfall. Welcome back to the Pacific War podcast week by week. I'm your dutiful host, Craig Watson. But before we begin, I just wanted to remind you all that this podcast is only made possible through the efforts of Kings and Generals over at YouTube. Perhaps you want to learn a bit more about World War II? Kings and Generals has an assortment of episodes on World War II, and so much more. So go give them a look over at YouTube. So please subscribe to Kings and Generals over at YouTube. You can help produce this content by checking out www.patreon.com/kingsandgenerals. And hey, don't forget about our sister podcasts over at the Eastern Front Week by Week podcast and the Fall and Rise of China podcast, both written and narrated by me. And if after all that, if you're still hungry for some more history, why don't you check out my personal channel, the Pacific War channel found over at YouTube, and Echoes of War found on major podcast platforms. I have a huge favor to ask. I recently opened up a clips channel for my Echoes of War podcast over on YouTube. They're 10-minute segments from the various episodes, highlighting, very niche and specific subjects. Those subjects can range from anything from ancient to medieval warfare to modern conflicts like the war in Afghanistan is going to be a recent episode. And I'd really like to expand on YouTube. We're using Riverside software to have map overlays, clips, photos, everything you can imagine to give it more of a visual touch. It's a lot of effort. So if you have a chance, please check it out. If you'd like to further support me, also consider checking out my YouTube membership or my Patreon account at www.patreon.com/PacificWarChannel. By joining either of those, you get access to the exclusive podcast series, which is 28 episodes and ongoing at this point, early access to all the content I make, and voting rights for the subjects I will tackle next. Those subjects, by the way, don't have to be exclusively to the Pacific War, nor to history in general. I'm willing to go outside of my comfort zone, so please check it out. After the fall of Okinawa, the Allies were basically mopping up across the Asia-Pacific and planning for what was assumed to be the most cataclysmic battle yet, the invasion of the Japanese home islands. But before we jump into that, we need to first travel back to Luzon. Now, by mid-June, General Krueger's 6th Army had successfully captured all key objectives in northern Luzon, southern Luzon, and the area east of Manila. Although General Yokoyama's poorly equipped 41st Army had been rapidly scattered and forced into hiding, General Yamashita's Shobu Group still retained enough strength to continue its resistance in northern Luzon. The Shobu Group was primarily gathering its units in a desperate last-stand position along the rugged valley of the Asin River, an area known for its very difficult terrain. Interestingly, General Krueger underestimated Yamashita's strategic intentions, still expecting him to make his final stand in the Kagan Valley, located in the northern part of Luzon. With this assumption, Krueger believed that if General Beitler's 37th Division could maintain its rapid advance towards Apati, situated at the northern tip of Luzon, they might be able to conclude the Luzon campaign in one pivotal stroke. However, intelligence indicated that units of the Shobu Group were retreating into the Cordillera Central Mountain Range, a formidable natural barrier located between routes 4 and 11. In response, Krueger ordered the 1st Corps to exert strong pressure on this mountainous region from the north, south, and west. To implement this strategy, General Swift directed the 6th, 25th, and 33rd Divisions to clear the supply route between Baguio and Aritao, ultimately sealing off Yamashita's last-stand position from the south. Meanwhile, Colonel Volkmann's guerrilla forces were instructed to advance east from the Cervantes to capture the crucial junctions of Route 4 and 11 at Sabangan. Recognizing the importance of controlling key roadways, the 63rd Regiment was tasked with pushing up Route 4 to seize the strategic location of Kiangan. In the south, the 130th Regiment began probing southeast towards Pigian, while the 20th Regiment continued to apply pressure on the remnants of the now battered 2nd Tank Division. Ultimately, General Iwanaka's weakened forces narrowly avoided entrapment along the Bambang-Pinkian Road, retreating northwards via a treacherous mountain trail and some river valleys. They reached the Tubliao area as early as July, illustrating the persistent and relentless nature of this campaign. Taking a look northwards from Cervantes, Volkmann's guerrilla fighters launched attacks towards both Makayan and Sabangan. By the end of June, their efforts had pressured the beleaguered 19th Division to hastily withdraw from Bontak, a significant town located in central Luzon, and then Sabangan. However, General Ozaki's forces maintained a formidable defensive position at the Lepanto mine, an area known for its mineral wealth and strategic significance. And I did not write this in my notes, but if I do remember correctly, I think it was the Lepanto mine in which MacArthur had bought some stocks before he left the Philippines. I think that's the same mines. This, of course, is alleged information. It's quite slanderous if it's true. Regardless, on June the 16th, the 63rd Regiment began its advance up Route 4, which runs north through the Central Highlands towards Kagan, a town that was critical for controlling the region. By the evening of the following day, American forces had successfully breached the defensive line established by the 105th Division at the Rayambugan Farm School, a local educational institution that was repurposed for military use during the conflict. Continuing their push, the 63rd Regiment encountered the main defenses of General Tsuda on June the 19th along Route 4. However, over 5 days of fierce fighting, utilizing only one battalion for the attack, they gained little ground. Recognizing the need for a greater force, they reinforced their assault on June the 24th. By June the 26th, the 63rd began to break through towards Hukab, a small settlement, and by the 29th, they had overcome the last organized resistance in the area. Meanwhile, the 37th Division also made significant advances. Resuming its drive up Route 5 on June the 17th, the 148th Regiment successfully pushed forward towards Nugulian, a town that marks a key waypoint on this route. Around 2 days later, the frontline troops reached Bangag, yet here they encountered increased resistance. They were now facing elements of Major General Yaguchi Shintaro's 80th Brigade, which was attempting to move south along Route 5. In a series of running engagements from the 19th to the 23rd, the 37th Division inflicted heavy casualties, killing over 600 Japanese soldiers and capturing nearly 285 more in a challenging 15-mile stretch between Bangag and Balasig. The remnants of the Yaguchi force were ultimately forced to retreat eastward into the rugged and uncharted wilderness of Sierra Madre's mountain range. General Krueger deemed it essential to execute an airborne operation over the northern Kagan Valley to ensure the success of the 37th Division's advance. It's possible that Krueger's motivation also stemmed from a desire to secure northern Luzon before the 8th Army took control of operations, which was scheduled for July the 1st. Despite contrary reports from various sources, including the United States Armed Forces in the Philippines' Northern Luzon, 1st Corps and 37th Division, and the Alamo Scouts team, Krueger concluded that Japanese forces in the Kagan Valley were retreating in, quote, in a wild disorder on Highway 5 towards Apari. It's worth noting that, in actuality, the general movement of Japanese troops had been southward for weeks, and no Japanese units intended to take refuge in Apari, which was a flatland area surrounded by mountains that made it pretty hard to defend. Based on his assessment of the situation, Krueger decided that in order to achieve the complete destruction of the fleeing enemy forces, he would launch a vertical envelopment of airborne troops to close an enemy escape route and prevent the Japanese from evading capture in Apati. Consequently, on June the 21st, Krueger ordered a battalion combat team from the 511th Parachute Infantry of the 11th Airborne Division to parachute near Apari on June the 23rd. However, on the 21st, the Connolly Task Force entered Apari without facing any opposition. By the evening of the 22nd, elements of the task force had advanced 10 miles south along Route 5, managing to secure the Kamalan-Nuagan airstrip, a crucial airfield integral to the logistics of both sides. Despite the successes of the reinforced Connolly Task Force, Krueger did not change his mind about the desirability and the necessity for the airdrop. Instead, he concluded that the seizure of Apari without opposition by elements of the Connolly Task Force on the 21st of June 1945, together with the almost unopposed advance of the 37th Division, indicated clearly that the time had come for mounting the airborne troops to block the enemy's retreat in the Kagan Valley. It is not clear just what retreat Krueger expected to block, however. On the morning of June the 23rd, The paratroopers dropped into Kamanugan unchallenged and immediately began their advance southwards to make contact with the 37th Division. That same day, the 129th Regiment took over the offensive, heading north towards Tuguegarao, a significant town in the region. Tuguegarao fell without any resistance by the 25th. By nightfall, forward elements of the 129th had pushed 10 miles beyond Tuguegarao, reaching the town of Igug. On the 26th, the forces made contact with the paratroopers at the Parrot River, further solidifying their position. By the end of June, Japanese resistance in the Kagan Valley had subsided, and General Yamashita's Shobu group, still capable of fighting, found itself encircled in a last-stand area that would become known as the Kagan Pocket, named by the Filipino-American forces engaged in the reduction. As the campaign progressed, the last elements of the 25th and 33rd Divisions were relieved. General Gill's 32nd Division took over control of the Baguio-Ambuclao sector, while the bulk of General Hurtis's 6th Division assembled at Hukap. This marked a significant transition as it signaled the conclusion of operations for General Krueger's 6th Army and Swift's 1st Corps. The command would soon shift to General Eichelberger's 8th Army and General Griswold's 14th Corps, who would carry on further operations throughout Luzon. Now, General Griswold's plans called for relentless pressure to be maintained against the Shobu group, who were then being forced into the Kagan Pocket. In line with the strategy, Volkmann's guerrilla fighters continued their assaults towards key locations such as Makayan, Sabangan, and Bontoc. The 126th and 127th Regiments advanced north along routes 11 and into the Agno Valley, engaging mixed forces from the 58th Independent Mixed Brigade and the 19th Division. Simultaneously, the 20th and 63rd Regiments were preparing to renew their attack against the 105th Division located at Kaangan, as the advance led by General Hurtis had been halted by torrential rains that had severely damaged roads and bridges. Meanwhile, the 1st Regiment made its own push northwards along Route 4 towards Banai, a town famous for its rice terraces and mountainous landscape. On July the 9th, Volkmann's 15th Regiment finally secured Sabangan. The following day, the 11th Regiment captured Bontoc, while the 66th Regiment began to break through the defenses set up by General Ozaki in the Lepanto Mines Makayan area. By July the 12th, Kaangan fell to the 63rd Regiment. However, they soon faced even heavier rains, which compelled General Hurtis to halt his advance once again. On July the 20th, the 1st Regiment reached Banai. The next day, they made contact with elements of the guerrilla 11th Regiment at Paulus Pass before turning east along Route 389. Here they aimed to engage a concentration of around 2,500 Japanese soldiers from the 103rd Division and the 4th Air Division. Back in the west, Makayan also fell by July the 20th. 5 days later, elements of the 15th and 66th Regiments made contact at a junction where routes 11 and 393 intersect. The 19th Division was withdrawing into the upper Agno Valley to establish defensive positions, blocking the northern, western, and southern approaches to Tokukan, a quite small but strategically important area. The 15th and 121st Regiments began their assault towards Tokukan, but they soon encountered remnants of the 19th Division, who proved to be still capable of effective resistance. At the same time, the 66th Regiment moved south along routes 11 to establish contact with troops from the 32nd Division, pressing the offensive forward. Looking further east, on the 24th, the 20th Regiment took over positions at Kayagan and began an advance towards Kangkang, and this is along the Asin River. However, the Americans encountered greater resistance than anticipated along this route, making only meager gains of 3 miles by August 15th. At the same time, other units were dispatched south towards Tabliao to block the retreat of General Iwanaki's remaining forces. On July the 29th, elements of the 66th and 127th Regiments finally established contact near Kambang. They then shifted east into the Agno Valley, close to Bagias, and initiated a southward drive to link up with the 126th Regiment, which they successfully met on August 8th. By August 15th, Volkmann's guerrillas found themselves 4 miles short of Tokukan from the northwest and about 1.5 miles short from it from the west. Within the eastern front, elements of the 1st and 11th Regiments advanced south from Banai along Route 390, reaching a point about 5 miles south of Banai by August 9th. That same day, they also cleared Route 389 to the east, securing additional pathways for their movement. Additionally, during this time, the 37th Division conducted vigorous patrols east into the Kagan River, pushing enemy troops deeper and deeper into the Sierra Madre Mountains. Unfortunately, this relentless pressure resulted in an estimated 1,000 Japanese casualties by August 15th. Throughout a month and a half of grueling fighting in steep, treacherous terrain, and under miserable weather conditions, the Filipino-American forces struggled to project any significant strength into the Asin Valley. They had suffered approximately 1,650 casualties in total. In contrast, the 8th Army estimated that the Japanese casualties during the same time period reached something like 13,500, with many killed or succumbing to starvation and disease. This would mark the effective conclusion of the Luzon campaign, a campaign that would soon be overshadowed by Japan's surrender. General Yamashita estimated in June that he had sufficient supplies to sustain his forces until about mid-September. Given the scale of effort the 8th Army was willing to dedicate to the campaign between July the 1st and August the 15th, it seemed likely that Yamashita would have met this deadline. When food supplies were depleted, Yamashita planned for his most effective remaining troops to attempt a breakout from the Asin Valley into the mountains of far northwestern Luzon, where he hoped to find more provisions. Those not involved in the breakout were to conduct banzai attacks along all fronts to cover the retreat of the main forces. Yamashita anticipated that whether or not the breakout succeeded, it would signal the complete disintegration of his forces. He even planned to commit harakiri amidst the chaos of the battle. As a result, the end of the war arrived about a month before Yamashita was prepared to officially acknowledge his defeat. By any measure, the Shobu Group accomplished the delaying mission that Yamashita had envisioned. Throughout the Sixth Army's control of operations on Luzon, the maximum commitment of major ground forces against the Shobu Group included 4 reinforced U.S. Army infantry divisions, 1 separate regiment combat team, an armored group, Volkmans, and the Buena Vista Regiment. When hostilities ceased on August 15th, the Shobu Group was still entertaining 3 reinforced divisions, those being the 6th, 32nd, and 37th. Additionally, it had significantly strengthened the Buena Vista Regiment and various other guerrilla units. After the war concluded, approximately 50,500 Japanese troops emerged from the mountains of northern Luzon, with nearly 40,000 of these coming from the Asin Valley's last stand area. Ultimately, the war ended with about a third of the Shobu Group's peak strength still alive and capable of conducting organized and determined delaying operations. It is clear that, over the 7.5 months since January the 9th, the Shobu Group executed a remarkably effective delaying action. Despite the circumstances, the 14th Area Army had achieved its objective of tying down as many Allied forces as possible in Luzon. This diversion was critical as it allowed the Japanese Empire valuable time to fortify its defenses in the home islands. Now, reflecting back to January, General and Prince Higashikuni, Naruhiko's General Defense Command, was operating with a modest force for land and air defenses for Honshu, Shikoku, Kyushu, and Izu Islands. The primary focus had been building naval and air power for Operation Shogo. In Kyushu and southwestern Honshu, the Western District Army, led by Lieutenant General Yokoyama Isamu, consisted of only the 86th Division and the 12th Air Division. Meanwhile, the Central District Army, commanded by Lieutenant General Kawabe Masakazu in central Honshu and Shikoku, had the 44th and 73rd Divisions, supported by the 11th Air Division. To the northeast, in Honshu and the Izu Islands, General Fuji Keisuke's Eastern District Army maintained the 72nd Division, along with both the 1st and 3rd Imperial Guards Divisions, the 66th and 67th Independent Mixed Brigades, and the 10th Air Division. Additionally, Lieutenant General Imura Toshimichi's 36th Army was positioned as a mobile reserve in the Kanto and Shioka area, comprised of the 81st and 93rd Divisions, along with the 4th Tank Division. Further north, Lieutenant General Higuchi Kichiro's 5th Area Army had deployed the 7th and 77th Divisions, the 1st Air Division, and the 12th Air Fleet stationed at Hokkaido. It also maintained a mixed brigade at Karafuto. Lieutenant General Terakuzo Shozo commanded the 27th Army in the Kuro Islands, which included the 42nd and 91st Divisions, along with the 43rd and 69th Independent Mixed Brigades, the 3rd and 4th Amphibious Brigades, as well as the Chishima 1st Brigade and the Naval Base Force. The air situation was equally as dire. Japan had only around 550 aircraft available for offensive operations and a total of about 770 aircraft and 1,200 anti-aircraft guns designated for defensive roles. As preparations for Operation Tengo unfolded, the air and ground units in Japan underwent significant reorganization in February. This restructuring led to the formation of several military commands, including Admiral Ugaki's 5th Air Fleet based at Kyushu, Vice Admiral Maeda Minoru's 10th Air Fleet in Kanto, Lieutenant General Yoshimoto Teichi's 11th Air Army in northeastern Honshu, derived from the now defunct 27th Army, and additional area armies such as Fuji's 12th in eastern central Honshu, Lieutenant General Okada Tezuku's 13th in western central Honshu, Kawabe's 15th in western Honshu and Shikoku, and Yokoyama's 16th in Kyushu. The reorganization of high-level military headquarters was not the sole initiative at this time. The Japanese Empire also approved a large-scale mobilization plan that called for the deployment of 42 divisions, 18 independent mixed brigades, and 6 tank brigades, amounting to approximately 1.5 million personnel. Following the fall of Iwo Jima and Okinawa, and with intelligence indicating that the Soviet Union was redeploying troops from the European theater in the Far East, Japan began preparing for the defenses of its homeland. This preparation involved activating the 1st and 2nd General Armies to replace the General Defense Command and implementing Operation Ketsugo. The strategy for Operation Ketsugo outlined that the Imperial Japanese Army would strive to defeat American forces while their invasion fleet remained at sea. The plan aimed to deliver a decisive blow against the American naval forces by first destroying as many aircraft carriers as possible, utilizing the special attack units from both the Air Force and the Navy. As the amphibious forces approached the range of homeland air bases, the entire air combat strength would be deployed for continuous day and night assaults against the ships. The focus of these air operations was to disrupt American landing plans, targeting primarily troop and equipment transports. Should any American forces successfully land, these would be swiftly assaulted by the Imperial Japanese Army to secure decisive victory. The primary objective of the ground operation was to eliminate the American landing force right at the beach. Operation Ketsugo was designed as a comprehensive joint defense effort, mobilizing the full capabilities of the Army, Navy, and Air Force. The Navy's essential role was to protect the coasts by attacking invasion fleets using combined surface, submarine, and air forces. The Air General Army would closely coordinate with the Navy to locate and destroy American transports at sea. If the invasion forces succeeded in landing, the local area army would take command of all naval ground forces in its assigned territory and would exercise operational control over the air units in support of ground operations. A key component of Ketsugo's operational planning involved reinforcing sectors under attack by units transferred from other regions. Given that the U.S. air raids had already severely impacted the transportation network, plans were made for troop movements to be conducted on foot. If the battle at the beach held no promise of successful outcome, the conflict would inevitably shift to fighting inland. To prepare for this, interior resistance was planned. Guard units and civilian defense corps personnel, along with elements of the field forces serving as a nucleus, would be utilized as resistance troops. Their mission would involve attriting American forces through guerrilla warfare, espionage, deception, disruption of supply areas, and blockades as enemy landing forces advanced inland. This operation divided Japanese territories into 7 zones, where air and naval special attack forces were directed to eliminate invading forces at sea and to establish an aggressive coastal defense. Field Marshal Sugiyama Hashime's 1st General Army established its headquarters in Tokyo, assuming control over the 11th, 12th, and 13th Area Armies, while Field Marshal Hata Sharoku's 2nd General Army set up its headquarters in Hiroshima, overseeing the 15th and 16th Area Armies. Additionally, to provide a cohesive command structure for all Army air units participating in the campaign, an Air General Army headquarters was formed under Kawabe. On the naval front, Admiral Toyoda took command of the General Navy Command, granting him supreme operational authority over all Navy surface and air forces. In the coming months, the Japanese continued to prepare for the anticipated invasion by mobilizing new units and diverting existing forces from Manchuria and other regions. By August, Yoshimoto's 11th Area Army had been reinforced to include 7 infantry divisions and 2 infantry brigades. The 12th Area Army under General Tanaka Shizuki was significantly larger, comprising 20 infantry divisions, 2 tank divisions, 8 infantry brigades, 3 tank brigades, 3 artillery brigades, and 1 anti-aircraft brigade. Okada's 13th Area Army was organized into 6 infantry divisions, 3 infantry brigades, 1 tank brigade, 1 artillery brigade, and 1 anti-aircraft brigade. The 15th Area Army under command of Lieutenant General Uchiyama Eitaro was formed with 8 infantry divisions, 3 infantry brigades, 1 artillery brigade, 1 anti-aircraft brigade, and 2 tank regiments. Yokoyama's 16th Area Army included a substantial force of 15 infantry divisions, 8 infantry brigades, 3 tank brigades, 3 artillery brigades, and 1 anti-aircraft brigade. Additionally, Higuchi's 15th Area Army consisted of 6 infantry divisions and 2 infantry brigades. In tandem with these ground preparations, Lieutenant General Sugawara Michio's 6th Area Army and Ugaki's 5th Air Fleet was assigned the critical role of launching a powerful air counterattack against the American invasion fleet, targeting carriers, gunnery ships, and transport vessels. In conjunction with elements of the 1st Air Army, the 5th Air Army, 3rd Air Fleet, and the 10th Air Fleet, the Japanese strategy focused on executing strikes against U.S. carriers. For this task, 330 Imperial Japanese Navy aircraft were specifically assigned. An additional 250 aircraft from both the Army and Navy were designated to target gunnery ships, while transports would be subjected to round-the-clock suicidal attacks over a span of 10 days. Various aircraft types, including trainers, transports, float planes, bombers, and obsolete fighters, would be used in kamikaze missions. The air assaults on the transports would also incorporate all available aircraft not assigned to other operational duties. Although Japanese fighters had limited effectiveness against the B-29 raids, they were expected to inflict damage on the invasion fleet. It was essential, however, that the Army and Navy fighters first establish air superiority over the targeted areas. Achieving this goal was a questionable assumption, especially given the formidable strength of U.S. air power now. By the end of June, nearly 8,000 aircraft, predominantly kamikazes, had been assembled for what was expected to be a decisive battle, with an estimated additional 2,500 planes likely to be produced by the end of September. To enhance these efforts, Kaiten suicide midget submarines and various special attack units were also designated to target invading enemy fleets, underscoring the significance of suicidal attacks in the Japanese military strategy. The hope was that these suicide or toko units would inflict 30 to 50% losses on the invading forces. However, as of June the 30th, only 1,235 surface special attack boats and 324 underwater types have been produced, significantly hampering Japan's preparations for the impending decisive battle. I think I'll just mention it here. One of the craziest things they came up with to defend the Japanese home islands was something in English we call kamikaze frogmen. It's really an insane idea. It's guys in basically underwater scuba outfits with lunge mines that were just going to attack the boats as they came close to the coast. And I'm only mentioning this because in a few weeks from now, if not a month from now, I will have a full episode on this subject over on the Pacific War channel at YouTube. And please go check it out. I really hope it'll be a fascinating one. In preparation for the seizure of Japan's industrial heart through an amphibious invasion, General MacArthur was laying the groundwork for a significant military operation. On April 3rd, the Joint Chiefs of Staff designated him as Commander-in-Chief of the United States Army Forces in the Pacific. This appointment granted him administrative control over all Army resources in the Pacific, with the exceptions of the 20th Air Force, the Alaskan Command, and the Southeast Pacific Forces. Additionally, all naval resources in the Pacific, except those in the Southeast Pacific area, were placed under Admiral Nimitz control, making them available for major operations against Japan. With the conclusion of the war in Europe, plans were proposed to redeploy 10 infantry divisions, 5 armor divisions, and 72 air groups to the Pacific. Consequently, the total forces in the Pacific were set to increase from approximately 1.4 million Army troops as of June the 30th to nearly 2.5 by December 31st. On June the 2nd, the 20th Air Force was reorganized into the U.S. Army Strategic Air Force under General Carl Spaatz. This command would oversee the newly formed 20th Air Force led by Lieutenant General Nathan Twining, which had been reorganized from the 21st Bomber Command, and Lieutenant General James Doolittle's 8th Air Force, which was reconstructed from the 20th Bomber Command and slated for deployment in the Ryukyus. Simultaneously, MacArthur was developing plans for Operation Downfall, the really ambitious strategy for invading the home islands. This operation envisioned a massive offensive against the islands of Kyushu and Honshu, utilizing all available combined resources from the Army, Navy, and Air Forces. The invasion plan consisted of 2 key operations, Operation Olympic and Operation Coronet. The American plan for the invasion of Kyushu focused on seizing only the southern part of the island, delineated by a line extending from Tsuno on the east coast to Sendai on the west. The 3,000 square miles included within this boundary were considered sufficient to provide the necessary air bases for short-range support in the final operations planned against the industrial centers of Honshu. Within the selected southern region for the invasion, known as the Olympic Plan, there were 4 lowland areas identified as suitable for the development of major airfields. The first area extended from Kagoshima, located in the western shore of Kagoshima Bay, through a narrow corridor to the Kishikino Plain along the East China Sea. The second area ran northward from Shibushi on the Araki Bay, traversing a winding valley to Miyakanojo. The third area began at Kanoya, situated east of Kagoshima Bay, and followed the coastline of Araki Bay. The fourth and largest area was located north of Miyazaki on the east coast. 4 months after American troops first landed on Kyushu, the next decisive amphibious operation against Japan was to be launched. Codenamed Coronet, this invasion targeted the Kanto Plain around Kyushu and was scheduled for March the 1st. The operation was tasked to 2 armies, the 1st and 8th, assigned to conduct major assaults against the heartland of Japan. Their immediate objective was to destroy all opposition and secure the Tokyo-Yokohama area. General MacArthur would personally command the landing forces and oversee ground operations on the mainland. Accompanying him would be the advanced echelon of his general headquarters, which would operate as the Army Group headquarters in the field. The initial landings would involve 10 reinforced infantry divisions, 3 marine divisions, and 2 armored divisions. These forces, launched from the Philippines and Central Pacific bases, would be continuously protected by ships and aircraft of the Pacific Fleet, alongside land-based air support. 30 days after the initial assault, each army was set to be reinforced by a corps of 3 additional divisions. 5 days following this reinforcement, an airborne division and an AFPAC reserve corps, consisting of another 3 divisions, would be made available. In total, these 25 divisions were tasked with seizing the Kanto Plain, including the general areas of Tokyo and Yokohama, and carrying out further operations necessary to overcome Japanese resistance. The strategic reserve for the entire operation would comprise a corps of 3 divisions located in the Philippines, along with sufficient reinforcements from the United States, allowing for the deployment of 4 divisions per month. Now for Operation Olympic, General Krueger's 6th Army was appointed to lead the effort, employing a total of 14 divisions that were already positioned in the Pacific. Meanwhile, the 1st and 8th Armies were designated to conduct Operation Coronet, comprising a total of 25 divisions primarily sourced from the redeployment of troops and equipment from the European theater. Eichelberger's 8th Army planned to land on Sagami Bay and subsequently fan out to secure the western shores of Tokyo Bay, reaching as far north as Yokohama. Concurrently, General Courtney Hodges' 1st Army was set to land on the Kujikuri beaches with the objective of pushing west and south to clear the eastern shores of both Tokyo and Sagami Bays. To mitigate the risks associated with landing on the heavily fortified and well-garrisoned islands of Japan, a comprehensive campaign of air-sea blockade and bombardment was advocated. The 20th Air Force, launched from bases in the Marianas and Ryukyus, aimed to cripple Japan's industrial capacity by ruthlessly attacking factories and transportation systems. This steady assault from the massive B-29 bombers was expected to severely diminish Japan's ability to sustain its large military organization and effectively distribute its remaining power. Simultaneously, carrier task forces would conduct repeated raids on crucial coastal areas, targeting enemy naval and air forces, disrupting shore and sea communications, and supporting long-range bombers in their strikes against strategic objectives. The Far East Air Force, also based in the Ryukyus, would focus on selected targets intended to dismantle Japan's air capabilities, both in the homeland and the nearby regions of North China and Korea. By intercepting shipping and shattering communication lines, the Far East Air Force aimed to complete the isolation of southern Kyushu, preparing for an amphibious assault. As the target date approached, it was planned that these air raids would intensify, culminating in an all-out effort from X-10 to X-day. In the final 10 days before the landing phase, the combined bombing power of all available planes, both land-based and carrier-based, would be unleashed in a massive assault. The objectives included reducing enemy defenses, destroying remaining air forces, isolating the target area, and facilitating preliminary minesweeping and naval bombardment operations. The fortifications within the designated landing areas would be overwhelmed by tons of explosives, while naval vessels and engineering units worked to eliminate underwater mines and barriers. With such concentrated power backing them, it was anticipated that the amphibious forces would be able to execute their assault landings with minimal losses. This strategy aimed to minimize casualties, further diminishing Japan's air capabilities, and cutting off their reinforcements from Asia. There was even a possibility that such measures could compel Japan to surrender, thus eliminating the need for a significant landing on the home islands. In a notable first, Admiral Spruance's 5th Fleet and Admiral Halsey's 3rd Fleet were to operate simultaneously. Admiral Spruance's fleet would focus on the landing operations, while Admiral Halsey's fleet would provide strategic support through raids on Honshu and Hokkaido. On July the 28th, the 16 fast carriers of Admiral McCain's Task Force 38 and the 4 British carriers of Admiral Rawlings' Task Force 37 commenced operations to weaken the air, naval, and shipping capabilities of the home islands. By mid-August, Vice Admiral John Towers was assigned command of the reinforced Task Force 38, tasked with executing a series of strikes against Japan east of the 135th Meridian, while General Kenny's Ryukyus-based Far Eastern Air Forces targeted objectives to the west. Additionally, Rawlings Task Force 37, enhanced to 9 carriers, launched diversionary strikes against Hong Kong and Canton. Starting on October the 18th, the 3rd Fleet began aggressive operations against aircraft, airfields, and shipping in Kyushu, Shikoku, and Honshu to isolate the assault area for the upcoming Kyushu invasion. 6 days later, the Fast Carrier Task Force was divided into Task Force 38 and Task Force 58. Task Force 38 retained 12 fast carriers, specifically for strikes against Japan. The pre-invasion airstrikes, surface bombardments, and minesweeping operations in Kyushu's landing zones commenced, steadily increasing in intensity as they approached X-Day, set for November the 1st. The 10 fast carriers of Vice Admiral Frederick Sherman's Task Force 58 would provide direct support for the Kyushu landings, which were to be conducted by Admiral Turner's Task Force 40, consisting of 800 warships and 1,500 transports. In this effort, 3 fire support groups, each accompanied by an escort carrier group, would launch preemptive assaults on the designated Olympic landing zones. Now off southeastern Kyushu's Ariake Bay, Rear Admiral Richard Connolly's 3rd Fire Support Group, known as Task Group 41.3, comprising 6 old battleships, 6 cruisers, 13 destroyers, and 34 support craft, was tasked with eliminating coastal batteries at Tomisaka, Hisaki, and Ariake Bay. Additionally, they would target seaplane bases and suicide boat submarine pens at Oshima, Odatsu, Birojima, and Sakida, followed by softening defenses of the 11th Corps landing beaches. Meanwhile, approximately 30 miles north along Kyushu's southeastern coast, Rear Admiral Ingolf Killen's 7th Fire Support Group, consisting of 3 old battleships, 8 cruisers, 11 destroyers, and 35 support craft, would bombard coastal batteries, suicide boat nests, and seaplane bases located at Tozaki-hana, Ososhima, and Miyazaki. This group would also destroy rail junctions at Tsumo Jogasaki and Tsuno to disrupt reinforcements heading south before finally shelling the 1st Corps invasion beaches near Miyazaki. Off southwestern Kyushu, Rear Admiral Gerard Wright's 5th Support Group, with 4 old battleships, 10 cruisers, 14 destroyers, and 74 support craft, were set to hammer fortifications within the Koshikireto and the beaches between Kaminokawa and Kushikino. Their mission included knocking out Nomizaki and Hashimiyasaki coastal batteries and the Akuna seaplane base, as well as Kunishikino's airfield, while also cutting the Akune-Kushokino road and railway lines. Ultimately, they would provide heavy fire support for the 5th Amphibious Corps landing beaches. Meanwhile, General Krueger planned to first secure Kagoshima and Aki bays as crucial ports of entry. Following that, the objective was to push inland as far as Tsunosendai to block mountain defiles and prevent any enemy reinforcements from the north. As a preliminary operation, on October the 28th, the reinforced 40th Division, now under Brigadier General Donald Myers, was assigned to seize positions in the Koshiki Island Group opposite Sendai. The objective was to establish emergency naval and seaplane bases on these islands while also clearing the sea routes to the coastal invasion area of Kushikino. The 40th Division was also tasked with making preliminary landings on the 4 islands of Teniga, Make, Take, and Ro off the southern tip of Kyushu, with the goal of safeguarding the passage of friendly shipping through the strategic Osumi Strait. On November the 1st, General Krueger's 3 main corps were set to conduct simultaneous assault landings in the designated objective areas. Major General Harry Schmidt's 5th Amphibious Corps would land near Kushikino, driving eastward to secure the western shore of Kagoshima Bay, and then turn north to block the movement of enemy reinforcements from the upper Kyushu. Meanwhile, General Hall's 11th Corps was to land at Ariake Bay, capture Kanoya, advance east to the shore of Kagoshima Bay, and then move northwest to Miyakanojo. Following this, Swift's 1st Corps would assault Miyazaki on the east coast, subsequently moving southwest to occupy Miyakanojo and then clear the northern shore of Kagoshima Bay, thereby protecting the northeast flank. Additionally, Major General Charles Ryder's 9th Corps, initially held in reserve, was selected to execute a diversionary feint off the island of Shikoku, while the other 3 assault corps advanced on the actual landing beaches. Finally, Krueger kept the 77th Division and the 11th Airborne Division in the area reserve, preparing to follow up the invasion forces. Should these units prove insufficient to fulfill their assigned tasks, a buildup from units earmarked for Coronet would be initiated at a rate of 3 divisions per month. Now, on the other side, the Japanese anticipated that Kyushu would be the next target and identified the same beaches selected for Operation Olympic as the most likely landing sites. In response, Generals Hata and Yokoyama concentrated the formidable 57th Army under Lieutenant General Nishihara Kanji around the areas of Araki Bay and Miyazaki. Meanwhile, Lieutenant General Nakazawa Mitsuo commanded the 40th Army, which was positioned in the Inju and Kagoshima sector to the west. Hata's mobile reserves were stationed near Mount Kurashima, consisting of at least 5 divisions and several independent brigades preparing to swiftly engage the enemy forces before they could establish and secure beachheads. Although Yokoyama and Hata did not anticipate an invasion in northern and central Kyushu, they had many units distributed throughout the region. The Japanese government prioritized defensive preparations for Kyushu over those of Honshu, hoping that a fierce defense of Kyushu would deter American forces from attempting a similar operation on Honshu. I would like to take this time to remind all of you that this podcast is only made possible through the efforts of Kings and Generals over at YouTube. Please go subscribe to Kings and Generals over at YouTube. You can help produce this content by checking out www.patreon.com/kingsandgenerals. Hey, don't forget about our sister podcasts over at the Eastern Front, Week by Week podcast, and the Fall and Rise of China podcast, both written and read by me. And if after all that, you're still hungry for some more history, why don't you check out my personal channel, the Pacific War channel found over at YouTube, or Echoes of War, my podcast series on all available podcast platforms. If you'd like to further support me, please consider checking out my YouTube membership or my Patreon account at www.patreon.com/pacificwarchannel. By joining either of these, you get access to the exclusive podcast series, early access to all the content I make, and voting rights for the subjects I will tackle next. General Krueger's forces tackled Japan's Shobu group in Luzon while preparing for Operation Downfall, the invasion of the Japanese home islands. Despite tough terrain, American forces made significant gains, encircling the Japanese. Meanwhile, Japan readied its home islands for a defense, mobilizing troops and launching air counterattacks. As the Allies pressed forward, the impending invasion loomed, with strategies developed to land on Kyushu and Honshu. Ultimately, intense battles shaped the eve of the operation that would determine the war's fate and change history forever.